Arif was a simple man with rough hands, oily nails, and clothes that always smelled faintly of engines. He had been working as a mechanic since he was a teenager, not because he loved machines at first, but because life had left him with no other choice. His father had passed away early, and with his mother growing old and weak, it was Arif who had to stand up and carry the family's burden. Every day he worked long hours at a small roadside garage where customers came with broken cars and left with repaired engines, while Arif quietly earned just enough to buy food and pay rent. He never complained, though sometimes when the nights were too long and silent, he wished for a different life, a life where he could at least rest without worrying about tomorrow's bills. That particular night, Arif had stayed longer than usual at the garage. A delivery truck had come in with engine trouble, and since the driver begged him to fix it before dawn, Arif agreed. By the time he tightened the last bolt and wiped his forehead, it was almost midnight. The streets were quieter than usual, and the only sound he heard was the distant hum of street lamps and the occasional bark of a stray dog. He packed up his old rusty toolbox, slung a worn cloth over his shoulder, and began walking back home. He could not afford a car or even a motorbike. His legs carried him daily, and he was used to it. As he walked, he noticed something unusual ahead. On the side of the road, beneath the dim orange glow of a streetlight, a shiny luxury car stood still, its hood slightly open. Next to it was a young girl, maybe in her early 20s, looking restless and frightened. She glanced around nervously, holding her phone but not making a call. Her outfit, a stylish coat with polished shoes, showed she came from a wealthy family. For a moment, Arif thought of passing by. It was late and he was tired, but his heart did not let him ignore her. He had always been that way, quick to help others even when he himself had little to give. He walked closer and gently asked, "Is everything all right?" His voice was calm, but carried the roughness of a man used to shouting over noisy engines all day. The girl looked up, a little startled, but when she saw his kind face, her shoulders relaxed. "My car just stopped," she said softly. "I don't know what happened. It won't start again, and I don't know who to call. It's so late." Her words trembled slightly. It was clear she wasn't used to such situations. She probably had drivers or family members who usually handled problems like this, but tonight she was alone. Arif nodded, placing his toolbox on the ground. "Don't worry. I'll take a look." He opened the hood of the car and leaned in. The engine was more complicated than the old vehicles he usually repaired, but engines all spoke the same language to him. With his flashlight balanced in one hand, he checked wires, pipes, and connections, moving carefully and quickly. The girl stood nearby, watching with wide eyes. She was surprised at how confident he looked, even though he seemed tired from his long day. Minutes passed in silence except for the clinking of his tools. Finally, he found the problem. The car's battery connection was loose and had caused the system to shut down. He tightened it properly, adjusted a few things, and wiped the grease from his hands onto his already dirty uniform. "Try starting it now," he said with a small smile. She stepped inside, turned the key, and to her delight, the engine roared back to life. Her face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Oh my God, you fixed it," she exclaimed. "Thank you so much. I was so scared standing here alone at night." Arif shook his head. "It was nothing. Just a small issue. You'll be fine now." She looked at him for a moment, as if trying to understand what kind of man would help a stranger in the middle of the night without asking for anything in return. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out some money. "Please take this. You saved me tonight. I can't let you go without something." But Arif stepped back. His eyes were calm, his voice firm. "No, I don't need money. I only did what anyone should do. Keep it." The girl was surprised. In her world, people rarely did things for free. Yet here was a poor mechanic, clothes stained with oil, refusing payment for helping her. She slowly put the money back, her respect for him growing silently. "At least tell me your name," she said. Arif wiped his hands with the cloth and answered, "My name is Arif. I work at the small garage down the road." She nodded, repeating his name quietly, as though memorizing it. "I'm Sana. Thank you again, Arif. I won't forget this." Arif gave her a polite nod and picked up his toolbox. Without another word, he turned and walked down the lonely road toward his small rented home. His back was tired, his legs ached, but his heart felt strangely light. It wasn't every day he got thanked so warmly, especially by someone so different from his world. He didn't know that this short meeting would change his life forever. To him, it was just another night, just another good deed done. He disappeared into the shadows of the quiet street, while behind him, Sana sat in her car for a moment, still thinking about the honest mechanic who had appeared at midnight like a guardian. She started her engine again and drove away, but his simple words and refusal of money stayed in her mind. When Arif finally reached home, his mother was asleep, and the tiny room smelled faintly of kerosene from the old lamp. He placed his toolbox in the corner, washed his hands quietly, and lay down on the thin mattress. The ceiling above him was cracked, the fan barely worked, but he was used to it. He thought of Sana briefly, then closed his eyes. To him, it was just another ordinary day, but little did he know this ordinary night was the beginning of something extraordinary. The morning sun rose slowly over the city, casting a golden light across the narrow streets where Arif lived. The call of vendors selling breakfast snacks echoed in the distance, mixed with the sound of honking rickshaws. Arif woke up early, as he always did, because mechanics had no luxury of sleeping in. His back ached from sleeping on the thin mattress, and his hands still carried the faint smell of grease that never really washed off. He splashed his face with cold water from the tap, tied his shoelaces, and set out for another long day at the garage. The garage was nothing more than a tin-roofed workshop near the main road. It had a few broken chairs, a rusty fan, and shelves stacked with old tools. Customers came in with dusty vans, taxis, or motorbikes that rattled like dying animals. Arif had learned to work on anything that had wheels. For him, every day was about tightening bolts, replacing worn parts, and sweating in the heat while earning just enough to keep food on the table for his mother. It was a life of hard work, yet no one outside his little world ever noticed his efforts. As Arif prepared his tools, he felt the memory of last night linger in his mind. He didn't tell anyone about it, not even his fellow workers. To him, helping a stranded girl at midnight was just the right thing to do, nothing worth showing off. Yet deep inside, he remembered her eyes, the mix of fear, relief, and gratitude, and the way she repeated his name as if it mattered. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus on the battered taxi that had just pulled into the garage. Meanwhile, in a grand villa across town, Sana sat at the breakfast table with her mother. The room was bright with chandeliers and wide glass windows that opened to a perfectly trimmed garden. Silver trays of food were laid out, fresh juice, croissants, and imported fruit. Sana, still thinking about the night before, broke her silence and said, "Mama, something happened last night." Her mother, a woman of strong presence and graceful posture, looked up from her newspaper. She was known in the business world as Mrs. Zara Malik, the owner of luxury hotels, resorts, and several companies spread across the country. Her name commanded respect in every boardroom. Yet at home, she was simply a protective mother who worried about her daughter's safety. Hearing Sana's tone, she put down the newspaper. "What happened?" Sana recounted everything: the breakdown of her car, the fear she felt standing alone in the dark, and the mechanic who appeared like a silent rescuer. She described how he worked with only a flashlight, how he refused her money, and how his name was Arif. Her voice carried admiration she didn't try to hide. Mrs. Malik listened carefully, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly. In her world, people rarely helped without expecting something in return. She was used to businessmen who always calculated profits, workers who demanded bonuses, and strangers who sought favors. But here was a poor mechanic, refusing money from a wealthy girl at midnight. That intrigued her. "Where did he say he works?" Mrs. Malik asked. Sana replied, "At a small garage down the road." He said it humbly, like it didn't matter. But I felt it did. Her mother leaned back, thoughtful. There are very few people like that nowadays. Someone who helps not because of greed, but because it is the right thing to do. She paused, then added, "I want to meet this man." Later that afternoon, Arif was bent over a motorbike engine, his shirt damp with sweat, when a sudden silence fell across the garage. He didn't notice at first, too focused on the stubborn screws he was trying to loosen. But when he finally lifted his head, he saw the cause of the silence. A black SUV had pulled up outside, sleek and spotless, completely out of place in the dusty street. From it stepped two men in black suits, tall and stern, looking around as if searching for someone important. The workers at the garage exchanged nervous glances. Expensive cars rarely stopped here, and when men in suits came asking for someone, it usually meant trouble. One of them asked in a deep voice, "Which one of you is Arif?" The name hung in the air, heavy. Arif's co-workers looked at him with surprise, wondering what he had done. Slowly, wiping his hands on a cloth, Arif stepped forward. "I'm Arif, why?" The suited man didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside, and from the car emerged Sana. She was dressed elegantly, her face glowing in the daylight. The workers' jaws dropped. It wasn't every day that a girl from the wealthy side of the city showed up at their greasy little garage. Sana smiled warmly when she saw Arif. "I told you I wouldn't forget," she said softly. Arif blinked, confused, his mind racing to connect last night's chance meeting with today's sudden arrival. And then, another figure stepped out of the SUV. A woman, tall and dignified, with a presence that made everyone unconsciously straighten their backs. She wore a simple yet expensive dress, her hair neatly styled and her gaze sharp enough to silence a room. Even before she spoke, Arif sensed she was someone of power. It was Sana's mother, the woman who owned businesses people only read about in newspapers. The garage workers whispered among themselves. Some even stepped back in fear, unsure if this was a police raid or some kind of inspection. But the woman walked straight to Arif, her eyes calm but searching. "So you are Arif," she said. Her tone wasn't harsh. It was curious, almost respectful. Arif bowed his head slightly. "Yes, ma'am. That's me." Mrs. Malik studied him for a moment. He looked young but carried the face of someone who had seen too many hardships. His clothes were torn at the edges, his shoes worn out, yet his eyes were steady, not desperate. She turned to her daughter. "This is the man you spoke about?" Sana nodded. "Yes, Mama, he is the one who helped me." Arif felt his throat go dry. He wasn't used to attention, especially not from people like them. He had no idea why they were here, and for a moment he even feared that maybe he had unknowingly done something wrong. But the gentle smile on Sana's face reassured him. Mrs. Malik extended her hand, a gesture that shocked everyone at the garage. "Thank you for helping my daughter last night," she said firmly. Arif hesitated before shaking her hand with his rough fingers. "It was nothing, ma'am." She was alone. Anyone would have done the same. But Mrs. Malik shook her head. "No, not anyone. Many would have ignored her, or worse, taken advantage. You did not. That makes you different." The workers watched silently, their mouths open. To them, Arif was just another mechanic struggling to survive. But here was a powerful woman treating him with respect. For Arif, it felt strange, almost unreal. He shifted uncomfortably, wiping his hands again, unsure of what to say. Then came the unexpected words. "I would like you to visit us at our home," Mrs. Malik said. The garage went dead silent. Everyone stared at Arif, waiting for his reply. His heart pounded. Him at their home? It sounded impossible. He wanted to refuse immediately. People like him didn't belong in mansions. But Sana stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Please don't say no. My mother really wants to meet you properly. You deserve that." Arif lowered his eyes, thinking hard. He had always avoided situations that put him in the spotlight. Yet there was something about the sincerity in their tone that made him pause. Finally, he nodded slightly. "If that is what you wish, ma'am, I will come." The men in suits exchanged quick looks, then opened the car door again. Mrs. Malik gave Arif a final glance, almost like she was measuring him, then said, "Tomorrow evening. Be ready." With that, they returned to the car, leaving behind a trail of stunned silence. The SUV pulled away, its engine purring like a beast, and the workers immediately crowded around Arif. "Who was that?" one asked. "What did you do?" another added. Arif simply shook his head, still dazed. "I just helped her last night. That's all." He tried to return to his work, but his hands trembled slightly as he held his tools. He couldn't explain it, but something told him that life as he knew it was about to change. What had started as a simple act of kindness on a lonely night was now opening doors he had never imagined existed. And deep inside, he wondered if he was ready for whatever was coming next. The next day moved slowly for Arif. Every minute at the garage felt heavier than usual. He tried to focus on his work, but his thoughts kept circling back to the unexpected visit. He remembered Sana's warm smile, her mother's powerful presence, and the surprising invitation to their home. It all felt like a dream he had no place in. He was just a poor mechanic who spent his days repairing broken engines and returning home to a dimly lit room. What business did he have entering a world of wealth and grandeur? Still, he had given his word, and Arif's word was something he never broke. By evening, Arif stood in front of his small mirror trying to look presentable. He wore his cleanest shirt, though it was faded from too many washes. His shoes were old but polished with extra care. He had no suit, no tie, nothing fancy. He looked at himself with doubt, but then reminded himself that honesty was worth more than clothes. With that thought, he stepped out, his heart pounding as if he were walking toward an exam he hadn't prepared for. When he arrived at the grand villa, the sheer size of the place stunned him. Tall gates stood before him, guarded by men in uniform. The walls stretched wide, the garden inside glowing with lights, and the sound of a fountain whispered in the distance. He stood at the gate, suddenly wishing he had stayed home. But the guard already knew his name. With a polite nod, the gates opened, and Arif stepped inside as if entering another world. The path led him to a huge front porch where two men guided him into the house. The moment he stepped in, Arif felt as though his feet didn't belong on the polished marble floor. The chandelier above sparkled with hundreds of crystals, and the air smelled of fresh roses. The walls were decorated with paintings that looked older than anything he had ever seen. For a man who grew up among oil stains and dust, the richness of the place felt overwhelming. He was led into the grand hall, where Sana and her mother were already waiting. Sana wore a simple but elegant dress, her face glowing with warmth as she stood to greet him. "You came," she said, her voice carrying relief. Arif bowed his head slightly, still unsure of how to act. "I gave my word," he replied softly. Mrs. Malik sat gracefully on one of the large sofas. She gestured for him to sit across from them. Arif sat carefully, afraid of damaging the expensive furniture with his rough clothes. His eyes stayed low, his hands resting awkwardly on his knees. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Mrs. Malik spoke. "Tell me, Arif, about yourself. Who are you, apart from the man who helped my daughter at midnight?" Arif hesitated. No one had ever asked him such a question. He was used to being ignored or treated as a nameless worker. Slowly, he began to speak. He told them about his father, a kind man who had taught him how to hold a wrench before life cut his time short. He told them about his mother, now weak and often unwell, who still smiled every morning and encouraged him to keep going. He admitted he had left school early to earn money, sacrificing his own dreams so that his mother wouldn't go hungry. He spoke of the long hours at the garage, the small wages, and the struggle to survive in a world that seemed to favor the wealthy. As he spoke, Sana listened with wide eyes, and her mother's expression softened. There was no bitterness in Arif's voice, only honesty. He didn't complain about his life. He simply stated the truth as it was. He ended with a small smile and said, "I don't have much, but I have learned to be content, and whenever I can, I help, because I know what it feels like to be helpless." The room was silent after his words. Mrs. Malik leaned back, studying him with sharp eyes, but there was respect in her gaze now. Finally, she said, "Do you realize, Arif, that very few men in this world speak with such truth? Most hide behind excuses or blame others. But you," she paused, then added, "you remind me of something rare, strength without arrogance." Arif lowered his head humbly. He didn't know what to say. Compliments were something he rarely received. For him, life had been about survival, not recognition. Sana broke the silence. "Mama, didn't I tell you? He is different. When he refused my money, I knew he wasn't ordinary." Her words made Arif shift uncomfortably, not used to being praised so openly. He looked at her and said quietly, "I only did what was right. Nothing more." Mrs. Malik gave a small smile. "And that is exactly why I wanted to meet you. People who do what is right even when no one is watching are the kind of people this world needs." She paused before leaning slightly forward. "I want to offer you something, Arif. Not charity, not pity, but a chance." Arif frowned slightly, confused. "A chance?" She nodded. "I own many businesses, but one of them is a company that manages vehicles for my hotels and resorts. Mechanics, drivers, engineers, all are part of it. I want you to work there. With your skills and honesty, you could do far more than patch up broken taxis in the dust. You would have better pay, security, and respect." Arif's heart raced. The offer was beyond anything he had ever dreamed of. Yet he hesitated. He looked at his rough hands and thought of his small garage, his mother, and the simple life he was used to. "Ma'am, I don't know if I belong in such a place," he said honestly. "I am just a roadside mechanic. I don't have education or polished manners. Mrs. Malik's voice grew firm but gentle. Belonging doesn't come from clothes or schooling. It comes from character, and yours has already spoken for you. Sana smiled brightly at his hesitation. You help me without expecting anything. That is worth more than any certificate or fancy suit. Please, Arif, take this chance. Arif looked at both of them, torn between fear and hope. He had always dreamed of something better, but he had never dared to believe it was possible. Finally, with a slow breath, he nodded. If you truly believe I can do it, then I will try. Mrs. Malik's eyes softened. Good, then it is settled. Tomorrow you will meet the head of the division. I will personally make sure you are given the opportunity. For Arif, the moment felt surreal. One act of kindness on a dark road had brought him into a world he never thought he would see. As he left the mansion that night, guided once more by the men in suits, he glanced back at the grand house. Part of him still feared it was all a dream, but another part whispered that his life was about to change forever. When he returned home, his mother noticed the quiet glow on his face. She asked no questions, only smiled knowingly, as if she sensed that her son's destiny was shifting. And as Arif lay down on his thin mattress that night, his mind was filled not with exhaustion but with hope. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years he believed it might be brighter than the day before. The next evening came faster than Arif had expected. All day he worked at the garage, but his mind was somewhere else. He replayed Mrs. Malik's words over and over. Belonging doesn't come from clothes or schooling. It comes from character. Those words had left a deep mark on him. For so long he had believed he was destined to remain unnoticed, just another mechanic fixing cars in the dust. Yet here was a powerful woman who saw something different in him. Still, doubt followed him like a shadow. What if he failed? What if he embarrassed himself in front of people far more educated and polished than him? By the time he returned home, his mother noticed his restlessness. She asked gently, Is something troubling you, Arif? He hesitated before sharing everything. The breakdown at midnight, the girl named Sana, her powerful mother, and the surprising offer. His mother listened quietly, her old eyes shining with both pride and worry. My son, she said softly, you have always worked with honesty. If someone sees value in that, don't question it. Walk with humility, but don't doubt yourself. Maybe this is the chance your father always wished for you. Her words calmed him like a warm blanket on a cold night. The following day, Arif prepared himself carefully. He wore the same faded shirt but ironed it until the wrinkles were gone. His shoes were polished again, and he made sure his hair was neat. Though he had little, he carried himself with dignity. By evening, he found himself once more walking through the grand gates of Mrs. Malik's mansion. The guards recognized him immediately and greeted him with respect this time, a sharp contrast to the suspicion of the previous day. Inside, the house seemed even grander than before. This time, however, he wasn't led to the large hall but to a quieter room that overlooked the garden. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and the air smelled faintly of sandalwood. Mrs. Malik was waiting, seated with calm poise, while Sana stood near the window, smiling warmly as Arif entered. You came, Arif, Mrs. Malik said, her voice steady yet welcoming. He bowed his head politely. You asked me to, ma'am. I could not refuse. She gestured for him to sit. This time, Arif felt a little less nervous, though the richness of the place still made him feel small. Mrs. Malik began the conversation with simple questions. How long he had worked as a mechanic, what kinds of vehicles he usually repaired, and whether he had ever supervised others. Arif answered honestly, explaining how he had trained younger boys at the garage, how he learned everything by watching and practicing, and how he often worked overtime to make sure customers weren't stranded. He spoke not like a man bragging, but like someone simply stating facts. Sana listened intently, occasionally smiling as if confirming her belief that Arif was different. Finally, Mrs. Malik leaned back in her chair. Do you know why I wanted to speak with you privately? She asked. Arif shook his head. She continued, Because I wanted to see if your humility last night was real or just a moment of politeness. Many people act kind in one moment, but in truth they are not. But now hearing you, I can see you are consistent. That matters more than skill. Arif felt his chest tighten. It was rare for anyone to acknowledge him this way. For years he had worked silently, never expecting praise. Now to hear such words from someone of her stature felt almost unreal. Mrs. Malik then shared something that surprised him even more. She spoke of her own struggles when she was younger. Before her empire of hotels and businesses, she too had faced moments when people underestimated her. "I built my world by recognizing people who were genuine," she said firmly. "Money and degrees are everywhere, but honesty is scarce. That is why I want you in my company." Arif swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I am grateful, but I still fear I may not fit in your world. I do not know business terms or polished manners." Mrs. Malik gave a small smile. "Those things can be taught. But the heart cannot be taught, and you already have what matters most." She paused, then added, "You will start in our vehicle maintenance division. You will be trained, guided, and supported. In time, if you prove yourself, you can grow further. But remember, Arif, this is not charity. I am not giving you money for free. I am giving you a platform. What you do with it is up to you." Arif nodded slowly, his doubts easing with every word. Sana, watching quietly, felt proud of her mother for seeing what she had seen in him. She added softly, "I told you, Arif, you are not ordinary. This is your chance. Please don't let fear hold you back." The evening continued with lighter conversation. Sana asked about the small garage, curious about the life Arif led. He spoke of the long lines of taxis, the laughter of the younger boys he trained, and even the tea shop across the road where he often had his meals. Sana listened with genuine interest, asking questions about things she had never experienced. For her, it was a glimpse into a world far removed from her own. At one point, Mrs. Malik excused herself to take a phone call, leaving Arif and Sana alone in the quiet room. Sana looked at him thoughtfully and said, "Do you know what I admired most that night?" Arif looked up, puzzled. "You didn't treat me like a rich girl. You didn't flatter me or try to take advantage. You just fixed the car and left. That told me more about you than anything else could." Arif felt shy under her gaze. "I only did what I felt was right. I couldn't leave someone helpless in the dark." Sana smiled softly. "That is why my mother trusts you already. People like that are rare." When Mrs. Malik returned, she handed Arif a small card. "This has the address of my company's office. Tomorrow morning, report there. They will be expecting you. Start fresh, Arif. Do not think of yourself as small. Think of yourself as a man who has earned this chance." Arif took the card with trembling hands. He bowed his head deeply, his voice almost breaking. "Thank you, ma'am. I will not disappoint you." That night, as Arif walked back home under the stars, the world around him felt different. The same streets, the same noise, the same dust, but inside him, something had shifted. For the first time, he felt seen, valued, and given a chance to rise beyond the boundaries of his birth. His steps were lighter, his heart fuller. He knew challenges would come, but he was ready. When he entered his small home, his mother noticed the card in his hand. She didn't need to ask. She already understood. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Your father would be proud." Arif smiled, holding the card close. Tomorrow, his journey into a new world would begin. The next morning felt different for Arif. He woke up earlier than usual, his heart racing with both excitement and nervousness. His small home looked the same as always. The cracked ceiling, the broken fan, and his mother's frail figure preparing tea. But inside, he felt like a man standing at the doorway of a new chapter. His mother placed her hand on his shoulder as he adjusted his clean shirt. "Walk with faith, my son," she said gently. "Do your work with honesty and God will take care of the rest." Arif nodded, carrying her words like a shield for the unknown ahead. With the small card Mrs. Malik had given him, Arif made his way to the company office. The building was tall and glassy, standing proudly in the middle of the city like a symbol of success. He paused outside for a moment, looking at his reflection on the glass walls. He felt small compared to the grandness of it all, but then he remembered Sana's words, "You are not ordinary," and forced himself to step inside. The reception area was unlike anything he had ever seen. Polished floors, large plants in shining pots, and employees walking briskly in neat uniforms filled the space. He felt out of place in his old clothes, but he kept his head high. The receptionist welcomed him politely, already informed of his arrival. Soon he was guided to the vehicle maintenance division, where rows of cars, vans, and service vehicles stood lined up in a vast workshop. Unlike his small roadside garage, this place was organized, bright, and filled with modern equipment he had only read about. The head of the division, a man named Kamal, greeted him. At first, Kamal's eyes scanned him from head to toe, clearly judging his appearance. But remembering Mrs. Malik's instructions, Kamal shook his hand and introduced him to the team. "This is Arif. He comes highly recommended." Those words gave Arif a strange pride. No one had ever introduced him like that before. Over the next few hours, Arif observed how the company managed their vehicles. He noticed that although the equipment was new and the environment cleaner, the engines spoke the same language. Bolts still needed tightening, pipes still needed checking, and batteries still needed fixing. It was work he knew well, only on a bigger scale. He rolled up his sleeves and quickly proved his skill. By the end of the day, he had repaired a van that had been sitting idle for a week, surprising even Kamal with how quickly he found the problem. Word began to spread through the workshop about the new mechanic who worked with speed and precision. Some of the workers were skeptical at first, but soon they started respecting him. They noticed that Arif never boasted about his skills. He worked quietly, focusing only on the job. He even helped younger mechanics, showing them tricks to save time just as he had done at the roadside garage. Within a few days, he was no longer seen as an outsider, but as someone who truly belonged. Meanwhile, Sana often visited the workshop, sometimes under the excuse of checking on the company's vehicles, but mostly to see how Arif was doing. Each time she found him busy at work, his face focused and his hands steady. She admired his simplicity and how little the luxury around him changed his humble nature. Once she teased him gently, "You work here now, but you still look like the same Arif I met that night." He smiled softly and replied, "Because I am the same. Clothes and buildings don't change who we are inside." Her mother too kept an eye on his progress. She received reports from Kamal and others, and each one confirmed what she had believed, that Arif was not only skilled, but also trustworthy. She began to see him as an example for others in the company, someone who rose not through privilege but through hard work and honesty. As weeks turned into months, Arif's life slowly transformed. His salary was far better than anything he had ever earned before. With it, he was able to pay off old debts, buy better medicine for his mother, and even save a little each month. He no longer worried about whether they would have enough food. For the first time in his life, he felt secure. Yet despite the changes, Arif never grew arrogant. He still visited his old garage occasionally, greeting his former co-workers and sharing his experiences. He never forgot where he came from. One evening, as he was finishing up at the workshop, Sana and her mother came to see him. Mrs. Malik looked at him with pride. "Arif," she said, "you have proven more in these few months than many people prove in years. You have shown skill, leadership, and above all, honesty. I made the right choice." Arif lowered his head, humbled by her words. "Thank you, ma'am. I only tried to do my duty." Mrs. Malik shook her head gently. "No, Arif, you did more than your duty. You reminded everyone here what true character looks like." She paused before adding, "I want to promote you. From now on, you will not only repair vehicles, you will also supervise the maintenance team. I trust you to guide them." Arif's eyes widened. The offer was beyond anything he had imagined. He accepted with gratitude, promising to work even harder. His fellow workers congratulated him, and for the first time in his life he felt respected not just for his hands but for his heart. That night, as he walked home, the city lights seemed brighter. He thought about how everything had changed because of a single act of kindness on a dark road. Helping a stranger at midnight had led him here. Life, he realized, often rewarded those who acted without expecting anything in return. At home, his mother listened to his story with tears in her eyes. "I told you, my son," she whispered, "honesty always finds its way. Your father must be smiling from above." Arif held her hand gently, feeling a peace he had not known before. Months later, people in the company still spoke of Arif as the mechanic who had come from nothing but changed everything with his sincerity. For Sana, he became more than just the man who fixed her car. He was a reminder that true worth was not measured by money but by character. For Mrs. Malik, he became proof that there were still honest people in the world, people worth trusting. As for Arif, he never forgot the night he first met Sana. Sometimes when he passed by that same road, he would glance at the spot where her car had broken down and smile quietly. It was a reminder that even the smallest act of goodness could open doors to miracles. He remained humble, but inside he carried a new strength, the strength of knowing that no matter how poor or unnoticed a man might be, one honest act could change his destiny forever. And so, The poor mechanic who once walked home with a rusty toolbox at midnight now stood tall as a respected supervisor, trusted by one of the most powerful families in the city. His story spread, not because of wealth or fame, but because it proved a simple truth. Kindness is never wasted, and honesty always finds a way to shine.